Hey, good morning, class. Welcome in. I hope you had a great spring break. We are going to continue our unit on the French Revolution and the Age of Napoleon. And we're going to start looking at the second half here. We're going to take a look at Napoleon Bonaparte. And our first discussion will be Napoleon Forges an Empire. So let's dive into this. We're going to continue working on our project. And there's going to be kind of a combined journal log, which will reflect both of our last discussions. The only time we'll ever do that. So that'll be something we'll look at here in just a moment. Okay? All right, here we go. So, Napoleon Bonaparte was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica. All right, when he was just 9 years old, his parents sent him to military school. All right, in 1785, at the age of 16, he finished school and became a lieutenant in the artillery. Okay, when the revolution broke out, all right, he joined the army of the new government. In October 1795, Napoleon was asked to defend against royalists who were marching against the National Convention. Napoleon and his gunners fired a cannonade against the royalists. So those were loyal to the king. He was basically against them. They, in response, fled in panic and confusion. So here he is defending the new government of the revolutionaries. Napoleon at this time was deemed a hero of Paris and the savior of the French Republic. From here on, he would ascend to fame and glory. And one of the things about a lot of big-time leaders is a lot of them have had a lot of military success, which has led them to their leadership. So, in 1796, the Directory assigned Napoleon to lead forces against Austria and Sardinia. Crossing the Alps, he won a series of stunning victories. However, he would lose an expedition in Egypt against the British. He would withhold any newspaper clippings that spoke negatively about him. Therefore, he maintained his fame. So he was all about his image. You're going to notice a lot of paintings about Napoleon. So even though he lost against the Brits in Egypt, he wanted to maintain kind of that perfect record on the battlefield, even though that wasn't the case. So, again, what you're going to see here, though, is where he's going to take power. And we're going to look at what we call a coup d'etat. By 1799, the Directory had lost control of the political situation and the confidence of the French people. When Napoleon returned from Egypt, his friends urged him to seize political power. Napoleon took action early on in November 1799. All right, troops under his command surrounded the national legislature and drove out most of its members. The lawmakers who stayed voted to dissolve the Directory, so another government dissolved by the French. Napoleon was made the first consul and assumed the power of dictator. All right, a sudden seizure like this is known as a coup. All right, this comes from the French word coup d'état, or blow to the state. In 1799, British, Austrian, and Russian forces joined together to drive Napoleon out. It was evident that Europe would be trapped by the horrors of war. However, in a span of 3 years, all three settled peace treaties with France. By 1802, France was at peace, and now Napoleon could focus his energy on France. This is the coup of 18 Brumaire. All right, another painting here of Napoleon. Now, Napoleon rules France. At first, Napoleon pretended to be the constitutionally chosen leader of a free republic. In 1800, a plebiscite, or vote, of the people was held to approve a new constitution. Desperate for strong leadership, the vote was in favor of the Constitution, and this gave all the real power to Napoleon at First Council. Napoleon did not try to restore the ways of King Louis XVI. Instead, he kept many of the changes of the Revolution. In general, he supported laws that worked out along the central government, while achieving some of the goals of the Revolution. Now, first, the economy needed fixing. Napoleon instituted an efficient method for tax collection and set up a national bank. This helped the economy tremendously. Napoleon also took steps to end political corruption and inefficiency within the government. He dismissed corrupt officials and set up schools to train government officials. These schools were known as lycées. All right? They were open to male students of all backgrounds. Graduates were appointed to public office based on merit instead of family connections. So no nepotism there. It was based on what you earned at school. One area of policy that differed from the Revolution was the issue of religion. Peasants and common folk wanted to restore the church to France. All right, granting their wishes, Napoleon signed a concordat, or an agreement, with Pope Pius VII to restore the church. Remember, the church had been removed. This led to a new relationship between church and state. Church influence was recognized, but the church was to stay out of national affairs. So they were there for religious purposes, but politically, they had no influence. Okay, and that's big. There's the painting of the Lycée Corcadat, or Condorcet, excuse me. Okay. All right, now, the Napoleonic Code. Napoleon thought that his greatest work was his comprehensive system of laws known as the Napoleonic Code. This gave France a uniform set of laws and eliminated many injustices. All right, however, it actually limited liberty and gave Napoleon more authority over individual rights. The code restricted freedom of speech and freedom of the press, which were established during the Revolution. The code also restored slavery to French colonies in the Caribbean. In 1804, Napoleon decided to make himself emperor. What? Whoa, that's huge. All right, French voters supported this, and on December 2nd, 1804, Napoleon went to Notre Dame, the Notre Dame Cathedral, for his crowning. At Notre Dame, Napoleon took the crown from the emperor and placed it on his own head. This broke traditions of the Pope crowning an emperor, so he literally took it himself and crowned himself. And here's the famous painting, all right, Napoleon as emperor. So again, this is all happening in a short amount of time. So, Napoleon creates an empire. Napoleon was not content with just being master of France. He wanted to control the rest of Europe and reassert France's power in the Americas. His goal was to strengthen Louisiana, Florida, French Guiana, and the French West Indies. Sugar became the most appealing crop in these areas. But Napoleon would lose two major pieces of land. First, his forces tried to restore a slave colony in Haiti. A fierce rebellion under the leadership of Toussaint L'Ouverture drove out French forces. This prevented France from accessing the sugar they desired. Next, Napoleon decided to cut his losses in the Americas, and this is a big thing for the United States here. He sold all of Louisiana to Thomas Jefferson for $15 million in 1803. The move was debated, but Napoleon wanted to enrich his forces and also punish Britain, their trade, and their geographic interest. Essentially, Napoleon wanted the United States to become stronger, and he definitely allowed us to become stronger. This, again, was known as the Louisiana Purchase. All right, so, again, we see Toussaint L'Ouverture, all right, again, Haitian slave rebellion, and then we see the Louisiana Purchase. And look at all that land, all that territory in the Midwest that was acquired through this transaction. Now, having abandoned his imperial ambitions in the New World, Napoleon turned his attention to the rest of Europe. He annexed the Austrian Netherlands and parts of Italy to France, and he set up a puppet government in Switzerland. Now he looked to expand even further. Fearful of his ambitions, Britain persuaded Russia, Austria, and Sweden to join them against France. All right, Napoleon met these challengers head-on and won a series of brilliant victories. Enemies could never predict his next move and incurred heavy losses. In these victories, Napoleon was able to sign treaties with Austria, Prussia, and Russia. Thus, France had become the largest European empire since Rome. Only Britain stood in Napoleon's way. So imagine that. France was in a mess, in a rut during the Revolution. And all of a sudden, as we take a look at this map here of Napoleon's empire, all right, his empire is going to expand. It's become massive, all right, in his time. Again, 1810 there. So during this time of expansion, Napoleon only suffered one defeat, and this was at the at the hands of the British at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. A naval battle, Napoleon lost to the brilliant naval admiral Horatio Nelson. This defeat did two things. It established British naval supremacy for the next 100 years, and it prevented Napoleon from launching an invasion against the British Isle. This would unravel Napoleon in the years to come. Quickly, the French Empire had stretched to massive portions of Europe from 1807 to 1812. Only Portugal, Britain, Sweden, and the Ottoman Empire remained free of his rule. Russia, Austria, and Prussia were on flimsy alliances. It was only a matter of time before this huge empire faced collapse. This spectacular collapse can be attributed to Napoleon's decision-making. So, he expands, he grows in a short amount of time, but as we saw with Rome, sometimes that expansion can be difficult to manage and difficult to lead, and we're going to take a look at Napoleon's collapse in our next lecture and discussion. Okay? All right, folks, I hope you have a great day. Again, we're going to have an extended journal log today with 10 questions instead of 5 because it's also going to reflect our last discussion. But I hope you guys are all set. Take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Thanks.